Good morning, one and all. Myself, Dr. Sini PILLAI, Research Officer at Digital University, Kerala, India. I am happy to present my paper in the 40th IBIMA conference, Servant Leadership Model, an emerging framework for successful remote workforce management. When organizations around the whole world were operating amidst the pandemic, a remotely distributed workforce has become the new normal. But creating a high-performance team with remotely distributed workforce, especially in a gig economy, seems challenging. So my paper attempts to develop a realistic servant leadership model for managing a remotely distributed workforce by applying multi-layer analysis. A standard questionnaire measuring various dimensions of servant leadership is administered among knowledge managers, and the success factors of a remotely distributed workforce are mapped with the 4E framework of servant leadership. Employee competence and organizational quality were identified as the major influencing outcomes of my research paper. The key areas of my paper are digital business transformations, servant leadership, remote distributed workforce, and 4E model. Into the introduction of the study, the emergence of gig economy made a complete revolution in employee-employer relationships, resulting in the workforce being distributed across locations. Employee engagement, reskilling, upskilling, and work balance were identified as the key drivers of this disruption. Retention was replaced by work balance, skill was replaced by reskilling and upskilling. Acquisition of talent turned out to be an outcome of employee engagement in a disruptive environment. Google initiated Project Oxygen, focusing on 8 key management attributes which are considered a success in managing people at Google. A remote distributed workforce has become the new normal and will evolve into the major portion of work culture in times to come. For a distributed workforce, exercising servant leadership would be the best to motivate employees to make sure they contribute to the best of their ability. So my paper is developed based on initial discussions with human resource experts, and data is collected from knowledge workers. The first part of the paper discusses on journey so far with the role of leadership during digital transformation, and the second part incorporates the finding based on a survey using standard servant leadership questionnaire and emphasizes the adaptability of servant leadership in the new normal and how it connects to the remotely distributed workforce during digital transformation. The focus of the paper can be divided into 4 areas, and literature review is done based on these 4 areas. Preparing the workforce for digital transformation. It is necessary to understand that leadership is necessary for leading everyone towards digital transformation. Only this is established, then only the workforce can be motivated and inspired to embrace the change, understand and adapt to the new ways of working, and eventually evolve into a change in the full company culture. By communication, it means that there should be a constant flow of feedback at all levels, and it should be imperative to collect employee and customer feedback and critically analyze it for action. Flipping the organizational pyramid. Agile leaders and agile leadership should be there to empower the individuals. And we know that the teams are not there to serve the leader, but the leader should be there to remove any obstacles that prevent the team from performing at its best. This style of management is also called servant leadership. For servant leadership model to work in a distributed workforce, each leader on the leadership ladder has to transform into a servant leader, ready to share authority and put the employee first. So that the next area, leveraging servant leadership with digital transformation, can be achieved. Bringing a human touch to workforce and work design will positively affect the organization as well as all the employees to get best from the job. Pre- and post-COVID survey stresses the importance of employee well-being for attaining the goals in the organization. This means that there should be a complete shift in the type of work culture, embedding human consideration through effective communication, commitment, and collaboration across organization, which makes the need of the hour. And the scope of servant leadership is expansive rather than restrictive, as it empowers workers to innovate by challenging the team members, pushing them to forecast, discover, reimagine, and find themselves worth in a disruptive environment. Now, managing remote distributed workforce with the 4E model of servant leadership. A servant leadership question is developed and applied to extract 7 dimensions of servant leadership traits. It is administered among knowledge workers from the state of Kerala. The data is analyzed to measure the dynamics of various dimensions. The data is collected from 275 remotely distributed workforce from the IT sector of Kerala state. And based on the total square, managers give high priority and preference towards emotional healing, followed by empowering peers and subordinates, behaving ethically, putting subordinates first, conceptual skills, helping subordinates grow and succeed, and finally creating value to the community. Remotely distributed workforce will be the new normal and will evolve into the major portion of work culture in terms to come, with the complete world being affected by the pandemic fever. And this is the various dimensions of leadership traits of managers, as I have discussed before. Based upon the total score, we can see that managers give high priority and preference towards emotional healing. Now, based upon the above framework, 4 key competencies to be called the 4 E's to manage remote distributed workforce blended under a practicing servant leadership model is suggested. And it comprises of empathy, engagement, embrace, and empower. Empathy means servant leaders has to lead with empathy, which is identified as the key to build trust. We know that distributed teams are based in different time zones, so it would be encouraging to schedule meetings at different times so that workforce from different locations takes to feel that they are considered as a vital part of all deliverables. Employee engagement. This is an emotional commitment of an employee as is purely business oriented towards achieving the organizational vision. The onus is on the organization to establish work methods and policies that will nurture and motivate the emotional connections of employees to remain long-term committed to the company. So servant leadership should ensure that organization vision, team goals and objectives are reinforced regularly. Embrace means for effectiveness and productivity, the organization should give sufficient training and monetary support to set up work infrastructure. That is, the company should invest by providing ideal office accessories such as laptops, desktops with software and hardware requirements, ergonomic chairs, desk lamps to set up an ideal home office. And the loneliness of working in remote distributed team could be bridged by utilizing technology. Video conferencing solutions can create dynamic, smarter and interactive solutions. What it comes in empowerment is, that is, the major characteristics of a servant leader should be not to enforce rules and strict instructions on employees, but servant leaders should empower the workforce to make decisions and act. Senior level people, the servant leader should be empowered to focus on team building activities with collective responsibilities. Employees should feel that the organization is interested in their overall well-being. It's also great if the organization aligns with global well-being goals and programs so that each employee feels they are contributing to a bigger cause. This section. Primary data is collected from 275 remotely distributed workforce in IT sector. Multi-layer analysis is carried out to quantify the effect of 4 E's on servant leadership model. And for that we have done analysis on the influence of servant leadership on employee competency and organizational quality. 190 observations are considered for training phase and 85 observations were included in the testing phase to examine the influence of servant leadership on employee competency and organizational quality. And as per the information, it is seen that servant leadership has a high influence on employee competency and organizational quality in the remotely distributed workforce. The factor is category, which is classified as technical and administrative. There are 4 covariates included in the model, which includes empathy, embrace, empower, and engage. The number of units is 6 and the rescaling method for covariates is standardized. The dependent variables are employee competency and organizational quality. Further, multi-layer graphical representation is done. This figure shows the multi-layer graphical representation on the influence of servant leadership on employee competence and organizational quality. The factor is category which is classified as technical and administrative, and there are 4 covariates. They are empathy, embrace, empower and engage. Totally there are 6, and the rescaling method of covariates is standardized. The dependent variables are employee competency and organizational. Now from the table, to examine the influence of servant leadership on employee competency and organization quality, the prediction level of training and testing are: for the training phase, the relative average error for the employee competency is 0.75, and for the variable quality, organizational quality, is 0.771. Overall average relative error is 0.783. Similarly, with regard to the testing phase, the relative error for employee competency is 0.780 and organizational quality is 0.662. The overall average relative error is 0.726. Servant leadership is the unobserved exogenous variable, and the effect of servant leadership in influencing the dependent variable on the present model is 0.907 with normalized importance of 73.3%. In this table we can see that the individual influencing ability of the covariate embrace is 0.138 and its effect is 13.2, and the cumulative effect will be 39.9%. For the covariate engage, it is 0.155 and individual effect is 4.8%. That's the cumulative effect will be 44.7. For empathy, it is 0.267 and individual effect is 32.4% with cumulative effect being 77.1%. For empower, its effect will be 0.347 and the individual effect becomes 22.9%. For the total effect will be 100%. The influence of independent variables on servant leadership for employee competence and quality is very high, and it depends upon, and servant leadership is dependent on employee competency and organizational quality. The figure shows the normalized importance of influence of independent variables on servant leadership. We can see that category has 27%, empathy 32%, empower 23%, embrace 13% and engage 5%. Based upon the relevance of independent variables on servant leadership, the success factors of remotely distributed workforce in 4E framework of servant leadership is mapped. So mapping of success factors of remotely distributed workforce with the 4E framework is done. There are about 16 success variables, and these success variables are mapped to the 4Es of servant leadership. Conclusion of the research paper: 4E model to manage remotely distributed teams under a practicing servant leadership model is suggested, and 4E model of servant leadership is mapped with the success variables of managing a remotely distributed workforce. And the study concluded that there is a substantial influence of servant leadership on employee competency and organizational quality. So the world is looking for a new leadership paradigm for the new normal. Is there a leadership philosophy that meets all the 4 criteria? Fortunately, the answer is affirmative yes. Servant leadership is the answer. Thank you.